Hey, welcome back to Everyday Economics, a podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm Chris Krug, president of 501c3 Franklin News Foundation, Everyday Economics, the production of America's Talking Network. You check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. To support podcasts such as Everyday Economics, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording today's episode on Monday, January 9th, and joining me, as always, is my friend and partner, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. He's a PhD economist. Orphe, I want to tell you a story, and I'm going to pull this straight out of the Harvard Business Review, which you and I both like and try to read as often as we can. Here's the story. I'm drawing directly from a story that was written in 2019 titled How to Survive a Recession and Thrive Afterward, a research roundup by Walter Frick. In early 2000, a 5-year-old bookseller called Amazon.com sold $672 million in convertible bonds to shore up its financial position. 1 month later, the dot-com bubble burst. More than half of all digital startups went out of business over the next few years, including lots of Amazon's then rivals in e-commerce. Had the bubble burst just a few weeks earlier, one of the most successful companies ever might have fallen victim to that recession. Timing is pretty important in an economy. We are all looking at what appears to be a recession that's headed our way. Of course, Orphe, I said we were in a recession last year, and you said, we are not in a recession last year. How do we get through this one? We know it's coming. We know it's coming.
Before you go any further.
Stop arguing with me all the time.
Before you go any further, I want you to say, Orphe, you were right.
All right, Orphe. So we just got done talking about seriously about revisions to employment numbers and whatnot. So yeah, magically we were like the numbers were altered. So we had like a teeny tiny gain that allowed us to say that we weren't in a recession in 2022. I don't believe it. Anyway, I mean, we're feeling like we're going into a recession in 2023, right? I mean, even you,
I
the
think
eternal
so.
optimist. How do we get through this?
I think a lot of things are going on that are indicating that the U.S. economy is slowing, and it's slowing rapidly. We did a podcast last week where I mentioned that the ISM Manufacturing Index, also known as the Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, a key indicator of the U.S. economy, had fallen again, the weakest reading since May 2020. An indicator basically that goods spending had decreased tremendously, that demand was weakening. And I mentioned last week that services were still rising. Guess what? Economic activity in the services sector also contracted in December after 30 consecutive months of growth, according to the Institute for Supply Management, or ISM. So yes, every indicator is flashing that the U.S. economy is slowing, and it's slowing rapidly. By the way, I want to make this clear. Slowing does not mean recession. It just means economic growth could stall, right? That if you get from, 2% growth to 0% growth, meaning that we didn't grow over the past year, that's perfectly okay.
That's better than negative 2% growth.
Exactly. And it's much better than negative. You have negative growth for a number of quarters with unemployment rate shooting up. Now you are talking about an actual recession. We don't have any of that yet. We didn't have that in 2022. But are we headed into one? Potentially. I mean, things are slowing down rapidly. Residential investment, an indicator of things to come, fell some 30% in 2022. The yield curve, another indicator, which, by the way, we'll talk about on another podcast, another indicator that the economy is headed into trouble, and that people would rather save than invest because demand is weakening, is also flashing all types of red signs. And so are we going into a recession? Potentially. We don't know. But here's what I think we should tell our faithful listeners and our friends that are out there. We should tell them how to prepare for it.
From this HBR story, and again, that this was published before the stuff hit the fan and before COVID, and it did offer some suggestions on how to navigate your way through a recession. The first tip, of course, is to deleverage before a downturn. So that would require maybe a little bit of a crystal ball.
I would say the signs are out there. Avoid borrowing and pay down debt. This is as clear as day. This is great advice that usually works all the time, but even more so when the economy is slowing and interest rates are rising as fast as they have in 2022. If you haven't paid down debt yet, you're late to the party, okay? Like 2022 was a year where we saw interest rate hike after interest rate hike, and I mean record rate hikes paying down debt should be number one on your list right now.
Yeah, but don't run out of cash, right? I mean, because at this point in time, borrowing is tricky.
That leads me to point number 2. You got to have an emergency fund. You got to have at least 6 months of your living expenses in reserves, ready to take you through the worst, if in fact things get worse. I mean, I write all the time that I don't think the worst will materialize in 2023, but you got to be there and you got to be ready just in case.
One of the other tips that was in this HBR story was to look beyond layoffs. So if you are a business owner, you and I are kind of moving back and forth here. We're talking about what you can do personally, but inside of your own business, or if you have touch on a business. I mean, your number one responsibility, if you're a business captain, is to not crash the company. Your own home situation, if you run it like a business, don't crash your home situation.
That's right.
But if you're running a business, don't crash your business. One of the other suggestions was to invest in technology.
I would leave that for last. The third thing I would say to our listeners is never stop looking for more work. Having more options means more bargaining power with your current and future employers. The best time to look for work is when you have a job. It also means that you have a hedge, right? Because recessions, I mentioned, is layoffs go up, the unemployment rate goes up. You know, if you have options, you don't end up being one of those people that ends up out of work.
Oh, so personal responsibility, I mean, take it.
Oh, yeah.
If we go into a recession, you and I haven't talked about this. I haven't even asked you this like offline. If we go into a recession, what's the typical period for recession?
2 quarters has kind of been where it's been historically, but we've had bad ones, right? I mean, look, we had a massive run up in asset prices, and a lot of people out there have been screaming, red flags, red flags, red flags. They've been nervous. They've been scared. They've been proven wrong so far. But I like to be prepared either way.
You talked about holding on to a reserve, and you said 6 months. Is that why that you recommend that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you end up losing your job, you want to have the cash on hand to support your living expenses while you're looking for work. And again, if you have other jobs lined up, that's great. One thing I absolutely love about the U.S. economy, U.S. households altogether, U.S. consumers, they're very resilient. They find a way to make it work, and it's amazing. There are very few economies like that around the world. Today we have people get into their cars and they drive an Uber and they find a way to make it work, right? And so that's beautiful, which is why I think it's really, really difficult to keep the U.S. consumer down. And so the U.S. economy always rebounds and rebounds beautifully. But going to my third point, because I think you were talking about buying stock, I'm going to say before you start thinking about buying stock, make sure you don't sell when the market is on the way down. Don't sell when the market's down. Don't make the mistake of basically taking a loss, never giving yourself the opportunity to be there when on the upturn, when things are improving. Just don't sell when the market's on the way down. Experts do this. Professionals do. Everybody panics. Fortunes are made during a recession. You should be, like you said, you shouldn't be scared to buy and invest in high quality companies while they're cheaper. I think there's a nice quote I saw on the internet that apparently Warren Buffett said, "Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful." When people are running for cover, there's some great deals out there. Make sure you're paying attention. And if you got some cash saved up and you got, more than your 6-month fund, and maybe that's a good time to go ahead and snap up some of these really, really cheap companies. And again, in a way that is sensible. You got to do your own research. By the way, again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you how I do things from my own life to make sure I'm okay and my family's okay.
Thanks so much for the insights for Orphe Divounguy. This has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other high-quality podcasts at americastalking.com.